Lolita D, welcome to Writers in Relationship.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's so great because I was watching your comedy this morning and I was it always makes me laugh when I literally laugh out loud. And I'm thinking the window's open, it's spring. Like my neighbors are hearing, oh, this like old lady like laughing. Um, it was such a delight. So it primed me for our conversation. So that was really a nice way to spend part of my morning. So I always like to start these with just how do we know each other? What's our relationship? I mean,
How
I
do
can't
we
even,
know each other?
I don't even know. Like it was a project, but like,
It was
how
a
did you
project.
get involved in the Like, I don't even remember.
So, my friend Kate, who's one of our blurbers, she must be on your mailing list or some listserv, or maybe you'd written some writers list because she's a professor of writing. Because you were looking for queer moms who were raising sons or male identified children, she wrote to me saying, "Hey, this is great for you. You love to write. You have these identities." And so that's how I got involved.
It's great. Yeah, and so we've worked on this collection and you've also been part of the marketing team, which has been so great because it's been fun to just get to know each other a little bit and we did another interview for that. So that was fun. Tell us a little bit about where you are. I'm seeing a fun looking poster or two. I'm seeing there's some
It's
stuff in your setting that's revealing.
my
So
catchphrase, the
yeah,
real
yeah, yeah.
giveaway.
Tell us a little bit about your setting.
So I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I like this is kind of my chair. I have my little posters behind me. This actually, the Speak Up, Speak Out. During the pandemic, a middle school in San Jose did this silent auction, and it was like silent on Instagram, and so they put art that was created by middle schoolers on Instagram, and you could bid on it. And it was to raise funds for like a community center or something. It was really nice. And so I bid on this artwork because I thought it was phenomenal. This is post George Floyd, so mid 2020. And I won. And so they sent it to me, or I went to pick it up. I can't remember. And it's been behind me. But my cats are anti-free speech. And so they keep taking the pins out. So it keeps falling down. And I have to remind myself to put it back up. And then this is the immersive Van Gogh, the American pronunciation. I am Dutch. I grew up in Amsterdam. And that was also during the pandemic that we went there. I was in SF and I took my son, who was 14. I mean, raging teenage years, right? And oh my God, did he complain? And his review of the immersive Van Gogh was, if I'd known it was going to be like this, I wouldn't have complained as much. And I'll take that. I'll
I
take that.
praise. I praise.
So yeah, that's where I am.
Nice. And I had prompted you like you've lived geographically an interesting life. So I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about
I've lived
that.
everywhere. Um, and I think once you start moving, you lose your connection with places in the way that people who've always lived in the same place have a connection. And I can be very jealous of people that live in their ancestral homes or, are still best friends with their people from elementary school. And at the same time, I also feel incredibly liberated that I don't have any of that, like none of it. And none of that is part of my life. So home is really wherever I am and where my son is. That's where home is. So I grew up in Amsterdam. Then I went to London, partially to get out of the Netherlands, which Holland has really good PR. Like it has this incredibly progressive, liberal, open-minded. But I found it very repressive growing up there. I didn't feel that I could really spread my wings. It's very small and very inward looking. And so I went to London. And then I ended up going to school there and I stayed for 20 years, got my PhD, did everything. And then I had my son, as and as people who will be reading the book know, as a single parent by choice. And then I realized it's ironic because now I live in by far the most expensive place on earth. But London was just incredibly expensive for a single parent. And so I thought, I really should move. And then this job opened up at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and Bush was still president. And I was like, okay, this is not happening. But I applied for it. I had friends in Madison, and they like, you should come. And I applied, and I got the job. And so I moved with a 2-year-old. From yeah, wild, really wild. I was 18 when I left Holland and moved to London, and sometimes I would look back and think that was hard. It was hard to totally, I mean, it was not far, but you're still going to a new country. It was hard to be 18 years old and completely upend myself. And then 23 years later, I did it again with a 2-year-old. And then I thought, wow, that was hard, and then I did it again with a 14-year-old 3 months before a pandemic, but we didn't know that. So yeah, so I then stayed in Madison until 2019, and then I was offered a job in the Bay Area and moved to the Bay Area, and then the pandemic happened, and it's been rough, but it's okay now. It's good. I'm very happy here.
I didn't realize it was so close to COVID when you actually
Yeah.
moved.
Yeah. And it was, I gave up a 4-bedroom standalone house in the Midwest to be in a teeny tiny little 2-bedroom apartment. And during COVID, during the lockdown, that was hard. It was really like I wouldn't have done this had I known. And that's not a good headspace to be in because like I didn't know. And that's not that's you can't make decisions. You can't live your life that way. Um, but that was definitely very hard. But now, we can be outside all the time and I love life here. It's great.
And has your son gotten?
Have you made peace with it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, yes, I mean he's still um quite like his life is online. His life became online during the pandemic and he's never really gotten out of that. But I've also learned to accept that the way that generation communicates with their people is very different from the way that we communicate. And I actually made a ton of friends online in the pandemic, and um, I now I have people in my life that I realize I've never met. There's one woman that I feel actively very close to, and I've never actually met her. And sometimes I have to remind myself of that. You don't actually know how tall this person is, even though you're on the phone together and sharing intimate details of your life. But I'm going to meet her this summer, so that's good.
That's exciting. There was a student of mine. I taught an online class at the college I was teaching at, and she was making a Christmas wreath, so I actually went to her house. She was so short. It was astonishing. It was astonishing. And it's that being faced with physical reality when we're not we orient so differently, and yet we don't feel differently in our relationships, right? Like there's no physical real like we've never met in real life, so I don't know how. I'm very tall. I'm almost 6 feet. So like,
Oh yeah, you give tall energy though. I'm 5'10". I always feel instead of our pronouns, we should put our height on our middle name.
that's a great idea.
I'll
Yes.
need to be 5'10". Any
I'm gonna
pronoun.
do that next time I'm in a business meeting and see if anybody notices. Um, so you're a college professor, is that correct?
I'm an administrator at a
Admin-
university.
Okay. And do you have a subject area?
Yeah, I work on South Asia. So I'm a what it once upon a time, a very, very long time ago, was called an Indologist, and that term fortunately is out of vogue. So now I'm known as a South Asianist, but that doesn't mean anything to people that are not in the academy. But I'm broadly involved in the study of South Asia.
And that's so different from comedy.
Oh, I don't know.
From the outside, not from the inside, maybe.
It's very, very different from comedy, and so I came to the writing of Boyhood kind of as a bit of both. I mean, Boyhood is really where my two personas meet, and that's scary and exciting. And I guess I'm outing myself now talking to you. So um I've kept my academic persona and my comedy persona quite separate because not everybody likes people having that much of an extracurricular existence, and my comedy is quite political, so I show a lot of myself on stage. And so for a while, I just wasn't willing to combine those two. And as time goes on, I mean, my students, like grad students who are around me for years, they know I do comedy, and and the way the algorithm works, at some point they're going to see my reels, right? And so I've relaxed into it. And so yeah, so I do both, but it's I wordsmith, they're not so different to me. I'm very funny in the workplace and I'm very smart on stage.
That's a
I
great
don't know if that's,
quote.
I've just lost anybody that might have been inclined to like me. I've just lost. But I try to write clever comedy and I try to be a funny-ish academic, because that's who I am. That's who I am.
And so have any of your students stumbled on your comedy? If so, how did that like did they tell you and how did that like that
Yeah, they tell me that.
must
I
be a
mean,
story, right?
I haven't heard anybody say, God, that was awful, or don't give up your day job, which I won't. I mean, I can't. I don't want, and I don't want to actually. But yeah, they see it. Some are very engaged and laugh at everything and give me the emojis, and other people are not engaged. And, it's fine. I mean, I would never, obviously, there are two separate lives. So I would never go up to a student and be like, hey, why didn't you like my latest reel?
But I'm just thinking, like, if I was a student and I saw somebody I was working with doing, I would be very in awe of that. Just the fact of getting up there and doing that, it's so vulnerable. And so it's brave in this kind of other way. You
But
know,
it's, yeah, but teaching is also scary and engaging with, I mean, being in the academy can be also quite intimidating because everybody's smart, everybody's well read, like that's baseline. And so you're always going to be surrounded by people who are smarter than you are, more well read than you are, have more complex understandings of whatever it is you're talking about. And so I don't, between that and an open mic, I don't know, both can be pretty scary. You just need to kind of have your crowd around you.
tell me about your writing process. And I don't know if it's different depending on what you're writing, but what does that look like?
It is different because I think the stakes are different. I'm not a disciplined writer. I always say, yeah, I have this joke that one of the things I have on my vision board is to create a vision board, because I don't have time. Like I just
Ah, that's so good.
you. Um, but it's also not true that I don't have time because I did binge, season 3 of The White Lotus, and so apparently I did have time. Um, but anyway, I don't have a kind of like I write from 7 to 8 in the morning kind of thing. And I know people who do, and I think it works really well. And it's something I just should do. It's on that list of shoulds. Um, I think I mean, the process is the same in that it starts off with an idea, and then you have to do something with it. And so in my academic writing, I'm writing on consent right now, which is something I've been thinking about for a very, very long time, because of some texts I translated and issues of consent that came up. And so it starts with an idea. This is kind of what I want to talk about. And then how do I do that? And how does it, I mean, of course, academic writing, you need to peruse and, you have to read a lot and then you have to think a lot and then you have to talk a lot. Comedic writing is not so different. I mean, there aren't any footnotes in comedy, so that's where it's a little bit different. But you still have to find a way of communicating what you want to communicate, and it needs to be funny. Like it can't be a TED talk. So in the academic world, it has to be accurate, but it also has to be compelling. Like nobody wants to read just like blah, blah, blah. Like it needs to be good writing. And then with comedy writing, yeah, it needs to be funny. That's really criterion number one. Sometimes feel some comedians lose that. They get so caught up in the art, and it's like, but it does have to be funny. If it's not funny, then and my friend Lynn Sun, who's a comedian in LA, says a joke is only as funny as the last time people laughed at it. And I do really like that. I don't know if she literally says that, but something in that sphere because I write jokes that I mean, I can just literally laugh out loud at my own humor, and then they never work. Or they work once. The worst one is if they work occasionally, because then you have evidence that this is a good joke. But if it works really inconsistently, and you kind of want to be like, come on, this is funny. But if people don't laugh, then it's not, whatever you might think about it. And the same with an academic argument. If people, you can't get people on board and they don't agree that what you say is obvious, even if it's obvious to you, well, then that's not good writing.
Yeah, you have to communicate.
Correct.
That's the essential thing.
I think in both cases you have to communicate, and it also has to be both accurate and funny in terms of comedy.
And so when you're working on a new set or a new show or new something, do you talk? Do you type? Like how does that manifest?
All of those, any comedian watching this will relate to the fact that the best ideas come at the worst moments. It's always in the shower, it's always when driving, and Gail, it's so weird thinking, oh, I'll remember this 3 minutes from now when I'm out of the shower, when I can pull. No, you can have the best thought about something that's really funny, and 10 seconds later, it's gone. And so I get out of the shower. I get out of the shower and I just write it down, like I jot down some like just memory joggers. And when I'm driving, I voice record. And so I just hit voice record and remind myself what the thing is. And then at some point I'll flesh it out. I might mic it for a little bit. So going to an open mic means that you're just working out new material. The people there tend to be other comics, and so nobody laughs. I mean, it's very lonely because they're all busy working their own material. But it's kind of like, how does this sound? How does this feel on a stage? You get a sense of it. Um, and then when it feels like all the ideas are there, I will write it out. But writing it out like word for word is you kind of lock it in, and while you're working out a joke, you want to have some flexibility because the words are actually really important. Like it needs to sound good. And so if you over prepare it while you're working it out, you might miss that if you use this word instead of that word, it will be funnier. And it's wild. I have a joke. It's a joke that I kind of peppers through a set about the difference between my therapist and my hairdresser. And um, I asked people, what's funnier? What's the difference between my therapist and my hairdresser, or my hairdresser and my therapist? And everybody's like, no, you want to start with the therapist. But why?
That was immediately what I thought.
There it is. Why?
I
We don't
knew it.
exactly. So that's why you need to. And if I'd written the joke, what is the difference between my hairdresser and my therapist? Then that becomes too much of an action to switch it around. So I tend to write it verbatim, really towards the end, and then it's the same. You will see me do the same joke, yeah, unless I have an idea and I add on to it. But that kind of the cadence is the same. Like it's a piece of art.
How did you start? Like how did you start doing comedy? When and how? Like what's the story of that?
Um, I'm one of those people that people have always told me I was funny, and I think I am funny, like wildly inappropriate often. Um, and so I think it was around the time I turned 50, um, which I'm not yet, people. It's like time is an illusion. No, I am. Um, I was like, I really should do that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to look into that. How does one become a stand-up comedian? I had no idea, like zero. And then I was still in Madison, Wisconsin, and my son and I had walked in Pride, and we had carried the flag. So we were at the front of the parade carrying the flag, and I wanted pictures of that. And so I went to various websites that would publish Pride pictures to see if our picture was there. And one of those websites, I couldn't find a picture, but had an ad. Um, Women run, women and trans inclusive comedy, learn how to be a stand-up comedian, something like that. A lady laughs. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll do that. And it started the next day. And I was like, okay, I'll do this. And it was with Dina Nina Martinez, who's a comedian out of Madison, Wisconsin. And she's still one of my greatest inspirations and friends. And so, yeah, I started doing comedy with her. And I really think you need to go to school. Like there's so much art to being a comedian. There's art to writing jokes. That will never not be something that you're learning. It's like learning a language. That just never stops. But just the art of how to hold yourself on stage, what to do with the mic, what to do with the mic stand, how to wrap up your set, all the kind of the basics. how do you use your time? How do you know when to end? Yeah, I learned all that in comedy school.
And so this is a recent practice for
Yeah, I
you.
mean, I actively, well, I'm not so close to 50 as I like to be. This was in 2018, I want to say. Yeah, so I've been doing comedy for about 6, 7 years.
I would have guessed like your whole life.
Thank you. That's actually a great compliment. Thank you.
That's so funny. Yeah, it's you're very, very natural up there. And
Thank you.
and I've seen a lot of people who are not.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
mean, a little painful. I mean, there's definitely people who are better writers than performers. Some people are so funny when they're writing. They're just not natural performers. And I hope I have a little bit of both. I mean, there are people out there who are so much funnier than I am, and it doesn't bother me. They're just like I don't aspire to be anything other than who I am. But I love it when people really make it because they're so funny. They're just so good.
tell us like, this is I'm always exploring the intersection between writers and writing and relationships, and I'm wondering, is there a particular relationship that's very alive for you right now, in particular in relationship to your creativity?
This is such an interesting one. I mean, I have a lovely person in my life in terms of my love interests. So I'm in a good, very good place there. So I think when I'm in a good place, I'm probably a better writer because you don't have to act out all the stuff. Um, but I wouldn't say that, she's my muse or anything like that. I mean, a lot of my material, as you've seen, is around being a mom. That's of course just a huge identity. It's also I mean, being a mom, it's like it's just funny. I mean, there's so much that happens around parenting that's, and that goes back to, some of it is not worthy doing on stage. I mean, some mom comics, we're not allowed to call them momics, but some mom comics do need to learn whatever you think is cute and funny, it's not. Like it's just not. So we don't need to hear that stuff. That's what your grandparents are for, kind of thing. But you do find yourself saying things like, I don't want you playing in the rain, and then come inside now, you need to have your bath. And it's like you're getting wet in the wrong place, but you do need to I mean, it just makes no sense. And so I do find the absurdity of parenting a kind of a very rich um, place, but I wouldn't say my relationship with my son is a motivator in that way.
Has he seen your comedy?
Oh my God, he has. So when I started, he was kind of still pre-puberty and he just thought it was the coolest thing. That did not last, let me tell you.
He didn't think it was cool for long.
Oh my God, as soon as, when they become proper adolescents, it's like you could be, I don't know, name a really cool person who's legit cool. I know Shakira, or I don't know who, that's probably ages me as well. Who's a young person that you could be that person and your kid would be like, oh my God, oh my God. I just,
But it
um,
but at
but
least
he
at
came with
first
me.
he
I mean,
got
yeah, because when I started doing comedy, I didn't want to leave him by himself. I mean, he was still young enough that I had him, so he came with me and he'd have his headphones on, and it's the best. He learned everything about all the things that you want children to know about, but like there was no need for human biology lessons or anything like that. He learned everything at comedy. And it sometimes would make performers really uncomfortable because people kind of, some comedy is really blue. And he'd be right there with this little iPad. But then when he got older, he kind of really refused to go and he could be home alone by then, so it was fine. Um, but then friends of ours from Madison came to LA maybe 3 years ago, and I'm like, okay, let me see if I can get a gig so you can see me do comedy there. And I did. I organized a gig for a Friday night, and my friend bought tickets, including a ticket for my son. And so he was like, okay, fine. And then he did say to me, you can't embarrass me. And so not embarrass him and no jokes about him and no jokes about sex. And I was like, well, that's 80% of my material. It's now been removed from me, but okay. I mean, that seemed really reasonable. And so I did a very political set with some, general observations about life in the United States. Um, yeah, and there he was in the front row, and sometimes he would laugh, and that was very good to hear. And then when we were driving back to the Airbnb, he went through it with me. He's like, I don't think that really worked, and I think perhaps you could put that over. It was amazing. I wish he would come with me every single time, but he doesn't.
So he was giving you feedback.
Yeah,
It's incredible.
I know. It was the best. I agree. It was the best. And it was good feedback.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Actually, speaking of feedback, do you have somebody who you work with, like a director, or like how does, like, do you, in your rehearsals, like, how do you hone and refine your?
Oh, so no, by then it's too, and you don't rehearse. Like you get booked on a show and you go and you do your thing. So I run a mic on Zoom, and so that people from all over the country can join. And that is more at this point more like a writing group. And so we give each other feedback. And so that's really where we work out stuff and give each other feedback. And I just want to give a little shout out to my friend Carmia, who runs Interfaith Comedy, and she is incredibly funny, but also just the best at feedback. She knows how to make something funnier, so she can punch it up, is the phrase. But she's also very good at saying, yeah, that doesn't work. And I don't know, she's got 5 kids. Maybe that's why. I don't know. But I can take it from her. With other people, I might be like, well, that's what you think, or that's just your opinion, which is fine. You don't have to agree with everyone. But when Camilla tells me something's not funny, it's like, oh, okay, I guess it's not funny. That's it. She has
What
a final word.
what makes her someone that is useful for you?
Who only knows? She is just someone who is incredibly funny naturally, but also incredibly sharp as to the art of comedy. She
Mm.
just gets what makes a good joke a good joke.
So you just trust her
Yes.
professionally,
Yes.
basically. Yeah.
Yeah. But I also trust her personally. I think that's a huge part of it. Like she's a good person.
Mm.
And so I know that she doesn't say, oh, that's not funny because, she feels threatened by it, or she doesn't like, my politics in that situation, or whatever it is. If she tells me it's not funny, it's just that it's not funny.
Yeah, she's supporting you in that comment.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, speaking of politics, I'm wondering because you have personal stuff, political stuff. You mentioned I was listening to it's the first video on your website, and you were talking about, oh, things have been hard since, 1865,
1492.
1492, and then you talk about, it was great. And then you mentioned getting sober, and I'm just wondering, what role does humor play in change and evolution? And are there lessons that we can take from the art form of comedy and use them in everyday life?
Oh, there's a lot in that. I don't. I mean, yes, of course, humor makes everything better. So there is that. But we do have to have a basic understanding. Like if something really traumatic had happened to you yesterday, you wouldn't want me making jokes about it right now. And so there is this idea that you need a time, right? It's tragedy plus time equals comedy. And then, people are very unagreed about how much time is necessary. And I think certain things will never be funny. I certainly I have a line, and comedians love to say there's no line. Comedians have to find the line and then cross it. I'm completely not with that. I feel like there's already so much that hurts people in the world. Why would we add to that on stage? But that doesn't mean that I only make comedy for people that agree with me. But I think that people that would woefully disagree with me would probably not think I'm funny, and that's okay. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I'm happy that I don't have to do this for a living, because then I think the desire, you do sometimes just have to make these compromises, and I don't want to do that, and I don't have to because it's a side gig and one that I value. Um, so so I think if you're trying to find common ground with someone, I think humor can really help because it can break up tension, but you can't joke about the thing that the other person is in pain about. And so if you and I are at complete odds as to what a moral life looks like, what a good life looks like, what our values are, then I don't really know. Like say that you don't think, and then obviously you're not that person, but say that I'm talking to someone who doesn't think queer people should have children. I can throw all the humor at it I want. I don't want actually, but we're not, there's nothing there that would make me feel like, well, I see your perspective kind of thing. You might, if the other person's willing to listen, you could have a conversation. Why do you think that? And can I give you some counter? And you might throw in a couple of jokes. So I think it could relieve the tension, but there still has to be a basic understanding that we want to find common ground. And if that's not there, I don't think humor makes, I think it will only make it worse actually, because then the person may feel that you're making fun of them.
I guess there's self-deprecation.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one, because a lot of women in particular self-deprecate like crazy on stage, and I don't love it. I feel that the world is already deprecating us. Um, it can be funny for sure, and it certainly can sometimes take the edge off if you're trying to, if you worry that you come across as arrogant and a little self-deprecation. Like you do need to connect with the audience, and the audience has to like you. And so, especially for women on stage, I mean, I think that's part of why there is this kind of general idea that women aren't funny, which is, yeah, I know. Um, but to be on stage, you have to have attitude. Like you have to get out there and stand there with the microphone and say, I'm talking now. This is my time. I have things to say and I need you to listen. Women aren't supposed to do that. And so I think we do fall into these. So the audience can be very much like, oh God, shall I go get a drink now in the next 5 minutes until the next bloke comes back up? And so I think women sometimes use self-deprecating humor to kind of get the crowd back on board. And that's, yeah, sometimes it's necessary, but I wish it weren't. I want
I like it when men do it.
Yes, yes, that seems more sensitive. But I do think men sometimes come across as funnier because they're so comfortable taking up space. And if you are confident, you're funnier. Nobody, I mean, when somebody says, this is probably not very funny, but, nobody's going to laugh at whatever. It could be the world's best joke coming next, and nobody's going to laugh. And so you have to bring it. And I think not all men, obviously, but I think on the whole, the way people are socialized into their gender, men are more comfortable doing that.
Yeah. They're trained to
Yeah,
be that way.
yeah, yeah, by
Tell us a
society.
little bit about your essay in Boyhood Reimagined.
Oh, um, I wrote it very quickly. Like I just sat down and thought about, I mean, I can't remember now, you had some prompts at the bottom of the email, the original the OG email. Um, and it was about being a feminist parent, right? It wasn't just about being a queer mom raising a boy. And that had been a real guiding light for me. And so I just sat down and thought of all the places where I had kind of tried to be a feminist mom, but because I am a comedian, I guess, I, I thought of the places where I really had kind of failed. I think the essay shows me trying and just coming up against these bizarre situations where I'm like, oh, this is not working at all. Um, and that remains true. My son calls me out all the time. It's just absolutely hilarious. Like I always say to him, when I told you to question all authority, like I didn't mean mine. Like I should have clarified that. Question all
You
authority
need to
apart
be
from mine.
specific.
And I sometimes feel like he doesn't question any authority but mine. Um, so yeah, I loved writing the essay because it made me reflect on how intentional my parenting is. And in fact, my friend who had originally connected me to you, read my essay when she was blurbing the book and said it made her cry, which I took to be a compliment. And then she said, I remember your son as a little one with his tie-dye t-shirt and his purple backpack. And it's true. Like I tried to be so intentional about the clothes that were available to him. And he had, boy clothes. Like he always had a say in that. But I did try and kind of steer him a little bit towards a more, open-minded way of looking at what it means to be a boy in this world we live in, and a white boy at that.
Yeah, which is different, as we
Yeah,
know right now.
yeah.
Tell us what you're working on right now. Do you have new projects in the hopper?
I have two a big project. So the comedy project is I started writing a while back. So my mother committed suicide when I was very little. That's my background, and I don't have memories of my mom. And I started writing about that some years back, and then I wrote about 10 minutes, and this really amazing comedian and producer in San Francisco called Wonder Dave has a monthly show I think it's in Oakland. Is it in Oakland? Yes, called the Mental Health Comedy Hour. And people talk about their struggles with mental health, which is pretty much every single comedian that out there. It's like, if you want your child to be a comedian, stop talking to them right now. Whatever you're doing, stop it.
It's every single artist. I would just broaden
Yeah,
it,
we want as
frankly.
much dysfunction as possible.
Yeah,
Like it's
bring it on and give them the material.
um so I asked him, can I try out the kind of stuff about, it's serious stuff, but he was like, sure. And so I did 10 minutes around my mom's suicide, and it was the perfect place for it because the whole show comes with a trigger warning. Um, and they have mental health professionals in the room and everything, but I really want to write 45. I mean, I have 45 minutes, I have much more, but I want to create a set where that sits in the middle. And so you need about 15 minutes of being funny and really letting the audience know I'm fine. Because the minute the audience starts worrying about you, you're no longer funny. So I need about 15, 20 minutes of like, I am absolutely fine. Then I want to do about 15, 20 minutes of the material around my mom, and then, an exit route that we could all leave happy, and, Lalita is good and life is good. Um, so that is something I'm working on, and I mean the material's there, so it's more like how do I organize it? Um, and then yeah, I would like to bring that out as kind of like a one woman show or whatever. So that's something I'm working on. And then academically, I mentioned that earlier. I'm working on a project around consent. That comes out of my own work in South Asia, but I'm bringing in other people, legal scholars, and yeah, different scholars who are looking at consent from different angles. So that's my academic project.
Wow.
And I mean, there are probably links. I mean, my mother no did not consent to being alive. She was done. But I did not consent to being dumped into it the way she did. Like, it's not good parenting, whatever she thought she was doing. And I've made my peace with the fact that she thought she was doing right by me. I know what depression looks like. I know what it feels like that everybody would be better off without you. And she took that to its extreme. So I'm definitely in a place where I can accept that, but nevertheless, I did not consent to it. And so I do actually feel there are overlaps there between those two different projects.
That's fascinating. I'm very, very curious. My adult novel is centered around mental health issues, and the main character's best friend completes suicide. So it's a theme. And
And I just because I know that the language has changed, I'm not because I grew up thinking, I mean, I didn't grow up because nobody told me about my mom. She was just gone. But after I was told that she had committed suicide, that was the language I used. And so I still the language I use. But I do know that people prefer the term she unalived herself. And
oh, I didn't even know that.
oh, really, I
Wow.
think, I don't know. I think it's. to keep the focus on the fact that somebody was alive until they just decided not to be alive anymore. And so there's more agency, I think, in the phrase. And so I just want to be cognizant of the fact that a new generation, like there's new language always, right? And I don't want to be that person that's like, well, we never needed that word. Just to clarify, and I guess in my work, I'll try and bring that in more, but it doesn't come natural to me yet. But we can learn, right? We can learn words. We're okay. We can do that.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing though. Like when you're working with your own language that you grew up with, and then you're communicating with a different generation who has different ways of expressing things. Like, how do you bridge that? That's probably for another time. But thank you, Lolita. It's been a total pleasure. Any last words on Boyhood Reimagined or any of the other writing and relationships?
Yeah, well, Boyhood Reimagined is a phenomenal book, so there's that. What I really like is that it took so long. I think one of the reasons it took so long for it all to come together was because we spent so much time on the labels. And I really appreciate that. I think that came up really early on when we met as a group of writers. Like, these are boxes, queer moms raising sons, and we didn't feel comfortable. But at the same time, that is also the lived reality because the world sees us as a particular gender or a particular role. And so I really love the way that we were able to kind of complicate that in the process. And so yay on that. Um, you had this question early on about relationship and what relationship matters to you for writing. And this sounds so like I'm going to sound so fake woke, but the relationship that really, the only relationship that matters when you're writing to me is my relationship with myself. Like if I cannot bring my full self to my writing, especially my comedy writing, it's nothing. It has to be authentic for me. For me, for it to work, it has to be authentic. And so I need to have a really honest and good relationship with myself. And that can be so much harder than it sounds, right? It's like,
It's much harder, and it's not something that we're taught to do and
Right.
encouraged to do, or even given the language about until we're older.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, totally. So yeah, those are my final thoughts.
Thank you. It was great to talk to you. And for everyone that's listening, I'm going to post Lolita's website. Is there any other place that people can find your comedy?
I think most of my stuff's on Instagram. My website is right now a little bit out of date, actually, and so thank you for reminding me I need to update it. The reason, you have these things that you kind of should do, but there's a block somewhere.
Oh,
And
yeah, 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 yeah.
my website is on a platform that I'm not happy with. And so I'm kind of like, oh, what I should do is, take the domain name, put it on another thing, and then update it. And now it's become such a massive, yeah, exactly that face. Like, so what I should really do is just keep it up to date while kind of, because that might never happen, the domain movement. So we'll see.
So Instagram, that's the best.
Instagram, Lalita D Comedy, it's there in my little Zoom box. That's always up to date. I post where my shows are, I post reels, I post, just observations on live. There's some political stuff there as well. And so, yeah, whatever I'm thinking kind of goes there.
I'm so excited. I mean, like, I watched two this morning, and now I'm like unleashed. I'm
Oh my,
like,
I love this. Yes.
yeah, gonna be great. So thanks and best of luck to you, and thanks for popping by.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care.